Hello, everyone. Sorry that I haven't had a video in the last few days. I haven't felt very well. I am still on treatment, so there may be days that I miss, but today I'm feeling good. The weather's good. It's beautiful out here. And I believe this is session number 5 in part 1. We're talking about soul ties and relationship baggage. So if you have missed the previous ones, go back and review those so that anything that I talk about today, you'll be able to understand. Today, we're going to talk about three main categories of soul ties. So, there can be intellectual, which is platonic, soul ties of the mind, such as those formed between student and teacher, discipline or disciple and mentor. It could be employer, employee. These would normally be neutral unless one has voluntarily placed themselves under the submission of the other and begins to be unable to assert their own will. The platonic ties are often dissolved or outgrown when the teacher student role is completed, or if the employee employer role is no longer this, if the employee leaves for any reason, or if the mentor and mentoree have that relationship has broken or finished. So those are usually completed, and or they may fairly easily be broken once recognized. However, these relationships can progress from that of a simple student teacher to dependence and bondage to the teacher, and even into idolatry. And this is the same as employee and employer, or even to the place of employment. And when we talk about idolatry, what exactly is idolatry? Because some people think of idolatry as like maybe little dolls or something material that you worship instead of God. Well, idolatry actually is anything that your mind and heart is desiring more than God. Like when you have an addiction, if you have an addiction to alcohol, that alcohol actually becomes your God. So that's idolatry. And so if you form a bond with a person and you feel the need that you have to be with that person all the time, that person's always on your mind more than God is on your mind and more than you spend time with God, then that could actually become an idolatry situation. So we need to be careful with what we're placing above God. And these relationships usually begin based upon shared ideas and beliefs, concepts, and understandings or goals. Soul ties that exist on an emotional level are based on emotional attachments, such as common feelings of love, fear, or hatred. The bonds of family are included in this, such as the soul ties between husband and wife, or parent and child, or even siblings. Also included are the bonds of friendship. Friends can definitely have a bond with each other. And when imbalanced, these healthy soul ties can become distorted or even perverted. Now, erotic or physical love attachments are soul ties formed by sin. These bonds are formed in sinful sexual encounters such as rape, molestation, or incest. Now, I'm not talking about the victim being the person sinning, because, of course, the victim is usually out of control of the situation. So it's the perpetrator that is going to sin, but yet there's a bond that has been developed. And that's why the victim is carrying that on through other relationships, is because there's a bond there of what happened. And so that's why we have put this in the physical love attachment or the erotic attachment. But any kind of illicit sex, such as adultery or harlotry, which, prostitution or sleeping around, however you want to say it, these form ties between the participating parties. So if you've had sex with people outside of marriage, every single person you've had sex with, you have actually created a soul tie with, a bond with, and whatever you take into another relationship, if that bond has not been broken properly, you're bringing all of their stuff into your next relationship. So that's something that a lot of people are not aware of. And that's why it's so important as to who you give yourself to, and why marriage is so important to just be with those two people, the husband and the wife. Now, soul ties do not usually form overnight, except in the case of the soul ties based upon unwilling or willfully sinning. such as with sleeping around or prostitution, things like that. Usually, soul ties are formed over a period of time as a result of numerous decisions to submit to another person. Now, Jesus is our pattern, and this is who we should be following. Jesus was the only man who ever lived in a sinless body and who possessed an undamaged soul. Jesus led a happy, spiritually successful life because he knew the following truths, which he also taught. Now, if you want to mark this down and read it later, it's in the book of Mark, chapter 8, verse 35. And this says, "For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it." Now, that's what Jesus taught. And another truth that Jesus taught is in John chapter 14:30, and it states in there, "The prince of this world cometh, hath nothing in me." Now, who is the prince of this world? That would be Satan. So the prince of the world is Satan because Jesus is the prince of the kingdom. Actually, he's the king of the kingdom, but he's been called many different things. All human soul ties must be counterbalanced by a love for Jesus. And this is mentioned in Matthew 10, verse 34 and through 37. It states, "He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." Now, what exactly does that mean? Obviously, Jesus is not speaking in this passage of a man actually hating his father, for that would contradict the sense of the overall teachings of Jesus. He is teaching that relatively, a man's love for Jesus must be so much greater than that for his own love for his family, his father, as to make the natural love seem less. He also warns that love for Jesus and seeking of his kingdom will often prove to be divisive and may be misunderstood by many men. So, like I said before, we need to keep Jesus above all things and all people, because if we raise our family, if we look to our family and respect our family more than Jesus and love our family more than Jesus, then they become our idol, our idolatry, our God. So, that's very important to remember. And the way we avoid loving man too much or becoming too attached or bound to any man is by loving Jesus more. So we need to keep our eyes focused on Jesus and remember that he has got to always be number one in our life. We need to keep our priorities straight. It should always be Jesus first, and then family, and then friends and others. So remember how the priority goes. Okay, and also we have seen the necessity of walking in truth, and Jesus is the truth, and to make any compromise with truth is dangerous. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn this on silent. Let's see. There is no such thing as a little or white lie. It is still a lie, big or small, and thus is a denial of the truth. Any relinquishment to something less than the truth is to identify oneself with untruth, and it is identifying is something that identifies with Satan and his kingdom, for Jesus identified himself as the truth. And you can see this in John 14:6, where it says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me." Truth must not be compromised. Paul and John warned against compromise both by their actions and by their words. In Galatians 2:4-5, it states, "This matter arose because some false believers had infiltrated our ranks to spy on the freedom we have in Christ Jesus and to make us slaves. We did not give in to them for a moment, so that the truth of the gospel might be preserved for you." And again in 2 John 1, verse 10 and 11, "If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house, and do not give him a greeting, for the one who gives him a greeting participates in his evil deeds." What does that mean? I think that means if they bring a false gospel, if they're not if they're not participating, if they're not preaching the true gospel of the kingdom, then you are not to bring them into the house. So when Jesus spoke of himself as the truth, the word he chose in the Greek literally means reality. I am the reality. He was saying, which truth, of course, is. Truth is reality. An alternative to the problem of negative soul ties is the hope of new relationships with Jesus introduced. In Mark 3:33 through 35, it states, "And he answered them, saying, Who is my mother or my brethren? And said, Behold, my mother and my brethren, for whosoever shall do the will of God, the same as my brother and my sister and mother." So Jesus made a decision to be controlled only by God. And I apologize for all of these little dings and things. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry about this. Next time I'll make sure I put it on Do Not Disturb. But Jesus made a decision to be controlled only by God and no one else, even those whom he greatly loved. We must do the same, determining not to allow even loving relationships to draw us into a state of disobedience to God. Anything less than that, full, total, and immediate obedience is disobedience. So if we're not following what God is wanting us to do, we're actually being disobedient to God. So I hope this kind of answers some things. And next, we're going to be talking about our pattern refused bondage, how we can become bound. So I pray that this helps you. And if you have any questions, just leave the questions in the comments. And again, I'm sorry for all the interruptions. Thank you and God bless.